In today's video, I'm going to show you 3 unusual uses of gels in your creative photography. Hey everybody, Lindsay Adler here. Color is essential to my work and to my style. I use it in creative portraiture, in fashion editorials, and everything in between. Now, one of the ways that I use color is by gelling my lights. And when I do so, I'm playing around with color theory and color harmonies for maximum impact. Now, what you're probably familiar with is attaching gels to the front of strobes or within the modifiers to change the color of light. You can change the color of your main light, your fill light, your rim lights, your background lights, anything that you want, and mix and match them. But that's normal use of gels. Today, what I'm going to do in this video is show you how to think outside of the box and use gels in a way that you've probably never tried before. Now, before I show you these little secret gel tips, I wanted to recommend my brand new Creative Lighting Guide. It's Creative Lighting Guide 3, and some of the techniques I'm going to show you today are in that guide, as well as many others. Now, before we jump over into the examples, I wanted to talk about my favorite gels. Gels fundamentally fall into 2 categories. You have your creative gels, sometimes referred to as party gels. They're the really super saturated, unusual colors. And then you have your color correction. This is going to be your CTOs, your CTBs, used to change the color temperature or tint of your lights. And then of course, there's other more functional gels like ND gels that are used to darken down your light. Today, I'm going to be focusing on our creative gels. And my favorite kit is the Roscoe Color Effects Kit. The colors are saturated and they really work well together. This is what I use in pretty much all of the images that you see from me. Now, speaking a little bit more about gear, today I'm going to be shooting with Profoto strobes. I'll be using a mix of Profoto Pro D3s and the D2s. And for my camera, I'm going to be shooting with the Canon R5 Mark II with the RF 24-105 2.8 lens. This is my go-to setup. All right, so I've set the stage for our use of color and gels. So what I want to keep in mind is that we're not going for typical or expected. We're going to step outside of the box. So with that, let's take a look. For our first creative use of gels, we're actually going to be cutting out little circles and shapes of gels and shooting through them. And the result is going to be really graphic and colorful. This is something I've seen in a wide range of different fashion editorials recently. And so I wanted to give this technique a try myself. So here's what you need to make it work. For this setup, I'm using a small piece of thicker plexiglass, and then on it, I put the cheap gels. What I did is I bought the least expensive I could find online. I cut them up in little circles and little shapes, and then I'm just using a clear piece of tape to attach it. Now, because this is not precise, if you look closely at my cutouts, they are not perfect circles and you can see the tape. Because of this, I want to make sure these are out of focus. So to begin with my camera settings, I'm going to make sure I'm shooting at a wider aperture. I'm going to shoot at f4.0, maybe f2.8. And so I'm just going to see the suggestions, the circles of colors, rather than a sharp or distracting edge. All right, so next up, for this setup, I'm going to be shooting with 3 lights. And my goal is to create something that's really clean, graphic, pays attention to shape and color, which is one of the reasons we've selected the dress for this scene. I wanted something that would make a really bold silhouette. And with silhouette in mind, I'm going to begin by lighting the subject as a silhouette by lighting a white background. We're using a Savage Universal Super White, and I'm going to light it with 2 strobes, one on either side. And then on those strobes, I have a small umbrella. This white umbrella allows the light to spread out and give me more even illumination. So we're going to begin there, and you'll be able to see what this technique is achieving even without our main light. Although this technique doesn't have to be shot on white, you can see how you're really seeing the super saturated, bold shapes surrounding the subject. And so it's nice because the shape of the dress is starting to mimic those shapes. All right, so now of course I need to light my subject. So for my main light, I want something that is really going to carve her out so I'll see that shape. And so I don't want it to be even and flat, which is why to the left-hand side of the frame, I am using a beauty dish with a grid. By moving it off to the side of the frame, that's going to create shadows, opposite side of the body, and then the grid is going to concentrate the light so that there is a fall off where the bottom of the dress falls to shadow. So this is going to give me a little bit more of a dramatic result. So let's add our main light, light number 3. right, so even in this test shot, you can see those bold and colorful results. But as I start shooting this, I realize that there are a few challenges that we have to work through. So first and foremost, I need to be careful that the plexi and the gels that I have here are not hit by the main light. If the main light reflects off of them, it's going to completely ruin the photograph. So what I've done in this case is I've moved the main light closer to the subject with a grid and then the plexi further away. So it is kind of lighting them or putting them in two different realms. Next up, when you are trying to focus, any ambient light can be really reflective and distracting. In fact, if there's big reflections, even if they don't show up in the exposure, it can actually make it hard for the camera to even find the subject's face. So my recommendation is to try to get rid of as much ambient light as possible. It's going to make your job a little bit easier. And then last but not least, your final challenge is going to be getting the right composition. In this case, even if I just get a little taller or move to the side, it totally changes where those little circles are. But you must also consider your distance from the subject as well as your focal length. When you come close and shoot wide, or you back up and zoom in, it's going to give you completely different results. So it's a little bit of a dance. Right now, I have the plexi on a C-stand arm with a little clamp. However, I'm actually going to have an assistant hold it so that every time I'm taking a shot, we can make little adjustments to better suit the composition I'm trying to achieve, as well as the focal length I'm at. The camera I'm shooting today is the Canon R5 Mark II, and on it I have a zoom lens that's going to make a big difference in getting the right shot. I'm shooting with the 24 to 105 2.8, and I'm going to be shooting at f4.0. Okay, with that, I'm going to bring out my assistant so we can get the shot. You probably are used to just attaching a gel to a light, but you can see that this can make a really fun result when you actually shoot through pieces and cutouts of gels. For this setup, we have a couple unusual techniques going on. This is one of my favorite approaches for high-key beauty images. I'll take a large softbox, in this case a 5-foot octabox, and put it directly behind the subject. And what I love about this is it creates a nice white background, and then the light wraps around the subject and creates beautiful rim lights. But we are going to add a twist here. In this instance, as you can see, we've actually added a yellow-orange gel. That is not just the tungsten modeling light. In fact, the light is gelled. So I want to show you what effect we're getting, and then I'm going to break it down. All right, so let's analyze this shot and what's going on. You can see that backlight. It is wrapping all the way around the subject, giving her a beautiful rim light around her hair and on her jawline, but it has that beautiful warm color because of the gel. But there's also something interesting going on here. You'll notice that the softbox behind her appears pure white, even though it's lit by a gel. And that's because that light is overexposed. When it hits the diffusion, it's so bright that it can't hold color information. So it appears white to your camera, to your eye. But the light hitting the subject, because it's darker, well, that's what's actually reflecting that beautiful yellow-orange. So this is a beautiful starting point, especially if you want a high-key image. And I take this approach all the time because it allows me to use fewer lights but achieve an effect that looks like I'm using many lights in a single frame. But I actually want to make this even a little bit more complex. When I saw this outfit and those rich golden brown tones and the beautiful gold, I wasn't thinking about a high key image. I wanted actually a low key image, which means predominantly darker tones. In other words, a white background isn't going to work. So what we're going to introduce is a flag. And fundamentally, a flag is usually used to block light. It's a frame with this black absorbent material on it. Now, most of the time you're using it in front of a light to put a shadow on the subject or to block the light off of a wall. But in this instance, we're going to place it directly behind the subject. And this is going to give us a totally different effect. Now we have a low-key image. The background appears completely black, but we still maintain those beautiful highlights wrapping around the subject. So what's happening is the light behind her, it has that beautiful warm color. The black flag blocks it, but because the edges of the softbox extend on either side of the flag, it still has room to wrap around. So if you look at the shot, it looks like she has a rim light on either side as well as a hair light, but it is all done with one large softbox. Now, by the way, if you look into Pro Photo accessories, they actually make something that does a very similar effect. These masks attach to the front of a softbox, and it's black in the middle and creates a very thin strip of light around the edges for basically the same effect. So this is a little bit of our DIY version. All right, so I have my beautiful warm rim lights. Let's add on our main light. And for this setup, I want something that's gonna be a little bit more dramatic. Again, I wanted to go for low key. So to the left-hand side of the frame, you can see our main light. I am using a Westcott optical spot. This is my favorite modifier for creating that effect with slices of light. On it, I'm using the kit lens, which is the 150mm lens, and we've closed down the shutters to create a slice of light. So let's add the main light into the scene. This hard light is giving us a lot of beautiful definition. This is what I was thinking when I first saw this look. Now, I will say when you shoot this scene, it is a little bit challenging because the flag is only so large, so you have to be careful with your compositions. One thing you could do is focus mainly on vertical images and then crop to that aspect ratio. But the other thing you can do is you can shoot wider and then simply extend the black background to the sides, which will allow you to have that beautiful wrap of light around the subject, but have a larger frame. So with that in mind, I'm gonna get the shot. So typically when you envision gelling a light, you're probably thinking of gelling it from the front or as a fill light. But in this case, we're gelling it from behind and then blocking parts of it to give us a beautiful wraparound rim light. So with that, let's take a look at our final unusual use of gels. For our final setup, we're going to actually hold the gel in front of the light in order to create crisp lines of color across our subject. Now, the concept for this shoot is actually based on understanding quality of light. So when you are using a hard light source, it creates really crisp shadow edges. For example, if you come outside into the sun, if you look at the shadow cast by the neck or the nose, it's going to have a really abrupt edge. This is a perfect opportunity to play around with creative shadows. I will hold different things, everything from lace to strainers, you name it, in between the light and the subject, and it creates a beautiful pattern texture. But another thing I've experimented with is holding a gel in between that hard light and the subject. In fact, one of my very first editorials in Elle magazine was using this exact technique. So I'm gonna show you a little bit of the behind the scenes and then also how you can vary this for yourself. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're going to begin with our main light on the left-hand side of the frame. The most important thing is that this is a hard light source. It will not work with a soft light source or anything in between. So no beauty dishes, no soft boxes. You should aim for something like a bare strobe or a silver dish with a grid, or even an optical spot. In this case, what we have done is we have added a grid to our strobe. Now, the reason I've done that is even though I'm shooting on a solid black background, if I use a bare strobe, the light will hit it and it might look like a little bit of a dark gray. So the grid, all it's doing is just controlling a little bit of the spill of the light, and it also makes sure that all the shadows on my subject are dark. I'm avoiding bounce light in my space. So that is ingredient number one. All right, so you can see from this hard light on the subject's face, it's giving me really defined shadow edges and jawline. Now this is going to become really important in a moment, but first what I wanna do is I wanna give a little bit more definition to this shot. So I'm gonna think about my color theory first. I think this image looks kind of cool, maybe futuristic, mysterious, especially with the makeup and clothing. So I'm going to go with a cool color palette. So to pop the subject out from the background, I'm going to be adding 2 rims. Now this is going to be using a more traditional use of gels. We're using 2 1x4 strip softboxes, one on either side of the subject, with a grid to control spill of light. But on both of these lights, we are adding a blue gel. So that's what's going to reinforce our color palette, the cool futuristic look I'm going for. All right, so let's add our back 2 rim lights for 3 lights total. Definitely not an unusual use of gels, but it's a very effective one. I love how you now see the beautiful cheekbones, jawline, the side of her body. It's definitely giving me that futuristic look. But next up is our creative, our unusual use of gels. So I'm going to introduce my assistant into the scene, and he is going to hold a teal gel close to the subject. Now, one of the tips if you try this technique is, yes, you have to have hard light, but if you were holding the gel, the closer it is to the subject, the more defined the edge of the gel will be. So you'll see a more crisp edge to the color. And also, you can use one gel, but you can also use multiple. You can layer them up, different colors. You can use them to create a slice of light. So in my very first editorial that I was mentioning before, I was using multiple colors, overlapping, intertwining for different colored palettes. So let's take a look at this technique, holding a single gel in between the light and the subject. Thanks, Stephen. So I'm gonna have you go across your face for me. And now move closer, and now go closer. In each of these 3 images, I had my assistant move closer to the subject with the gel. And you'll notice that in the first shot, the color was a little diffused, the edge of the gel wasn't very visible. As he got closer, a little bit more defined, and then extremely close, we get that beautiful defined edge of the gel, that beautiful teal. So you wanna keep that in mind for control of your light. So this is looking really beautiful to me, but I think I wanna make it even more creative. And so for our real shoot, we're going to introduce 2 teal gels, and I'm going to have him constantly moving it at different angles to create different interesting compositions. We're able to achieve a technique that would be very difficult to do otherwise without having specialty modifiers. You'll see the beautiful teal on her chest and across her face. I love what that looks like, and it makes the light so much more interesting. So this is definitely an unusual use of a gel. So with that, I'm gonna go get the shot. Now, obviously, the unusual use of this gel makes the shot interesting, but what makes it even more effective is thinking about color theory rather than just throwing different colors together and hoping it works. So there you have it, 3 unique ways to use color gels in your photography that is totally outside the norm. And this is one of the things I love about photography is I am always exploring and always discovering, and then I'm always sharing it with you. So if you want to see more of my creative lighting setups, including my creative lighting recipe guides, be sure to check out the links in the description below. And if you want to see all the gear I use in these setups, I've got that listed down there for you as well. And when you pick up that gear, be sure to visit adorama.com. See you next time, everybody.